Human beings are inclined to believe in progress. Without a shadow of doubt, we step into the cabin of a machine weighing hundreds of tons that rises into the sky in defiance of common sense, and we calmly entrust it with the most valuable thing we have: our own lives. It seems to us that thousands of calculations, hundreds of engineers, endless ground tests, and strict procedures have made the impossible possible, have subdued gravity and forced metal to remain in the air. We trust the logic of automation, the infallibility of systems, the strength of bolts and panels. But what if this very confidence is the most dangerous illusion? What if at the very heart of our technological triumphs, beneath the smooth skin and behind the roar of turbines, chaos is hiding? Tiny cracks, metal fatigue, human haste and overconfidence patiently waiting for their moment. These are not just stories about disasters. These are stories about those who found themselves on the very edge and managed to return. About people who felt on their own skin how fragile the line between sky and earth really is, and how easily it can break. 27 minutes after takeoff, at an altitude of about 5,300 meters, a routine flight from a British industrial city toward the warm Mediterranean coast continues calmly. In the cockpit, there is relaxed conversation. The autopilot holds the course, shoulder harnesses are loosened, and the captain completely unfastens his lap belt. Formally a violation, but at cruising altitude many allow themselves such freedom for comfort. At 7 o'clock, a bang is heard, dry and sharp, as if a grenade had exploded. In the very same second, the cockpit fills with mist. Explosive decompression. The windshield on the captain's side is torn outward, and the airflow rushing past at more than 600 kilometers per hour at a temperature of minus 17 degrees literally pulls the man out of his seat. His body is dragged into the opening like a rag doll, but his legs miraculously catch on the control structure, and the aircraft, receiving a sudden input, pitches into a steep descent. The first officer freezes for a moment in shock, but he has to act. A flight attendant standing in the cockpit doorway lunges forward and grabs the captain by his clothes, becoming the only obstacle between him and a fall from 5 kilometers. The rushing air tries to pull him out as well. The cockpit door is torn from its mountings, the instruments tremble, the autopilot disconnects, and the thrust levers jam. The aircraft banks, the nose pointed downward. A desperate struggle begins. The first officer tries to regain control of the aircraft, holding the control column with one hand while transmitting a distress signal with the other. But because of the deafening roar of the wind, he can barely hear the controller's replies and is not sure whether his message was received. Outside, the captain's body bends in an arc, his head and shoulders striking the fuselage, his face blasted by the icy stream, his eyes open, blood visible at his mouth. Inside, a terrible thought appears. He is already dead. But letting go is impossible. If the body slips away, it could be sucked into the engine, and then the catastrophe would become inevitable. 2 more crew members join the effort to hold him, forming a human chain, locking hands and bracing their feet against elements of the cockpit. The minutes stretch endlessly. The aircraft continues descending, the speed remains high, and the structure shudders. The first officer manages to partially stabilize the flight and directs the damaged aircraft toward the nearest airfield, where he has never landed before. The navigation charts have been blown away by the wind, and he must rely on instructions from air traffic controllers. He does not know whether the captain is alive, whether the people holding him can endure, or whether he will be able to land the airliner alone. After more than half an hour of tension, the aircraft touches the runway and comes to a stop. Emergency services rush toward the cockpit, expecting to see a tragedy. The flight attendants are frostbitten, their hands cramped with cold, but they are still holding their captain's legs. As he is carefully pulled back inside, someone notices the faintest movement. He is alive. After more than 20 minutes outside the fuselage at an altitude of over 5 kilometers in an icy airflow and at tremendous speed, the man survives, suffering severe frostbite and fractures but keeping his life. The investigation reveals a shockingly simple cause. The day before the flight, during scheduled maintenance, the windshield had been replaced. The technician, highly experienced, decided to work from memory and did not consult the documentation. The bolts used to secure the new windshield differed in diameter and length, and most of them barely engaged the threads. The inspection system allowed the technician to check and sign off his own work. No one rechecked it. At altitude, the pressure differential reached a critical level. The fasteners failed, and the windshield was blown outward. This case became a serious lesson for aviation. Maintenance procedures were revised, controls were tightened, mandatory double inspections were introduced, and documentation requirements were strengthened. But this is only one of the stories demonstrating how fragile the illusion of reliability can be. In the late 1980s, over the Pacific Ocean, an aircraft performing a short inter-island flight climbed to the usual altitude for the route. The aircraft had been flying between neighboring islands for years, completing tens of thousands of pressurization cycles. The passengers were expecting a soon arrival when suddenly a bang was heard, and a small defect in the upper fuselage turned into a massive rupture. Explosive decompression tore away a large section of the skin, and the first-class cabin was left open to the sky at a speed of about 500 kilometers per hour. One flight attendant was blown out of the aircraft, and dozens of people were injured. Seeing not instruments but a gaping hole in the sky ahead of them, the pilots began an emergency descent, not knowing whether the structure would hold. The aircraft was landed successfully, but the investigation revealed multiple fatigue cracks, corrosion, and insufficient inspection in an aircraft with an enormous number of pressurization cycles. Decades later, another incident demonstrated a different threat. The failure of a turbine component inside an engine caused the engine cowling to be torn apart from within. Metal fragments pierced the nacelle, and flames became visible through the windows. The crew promptly shut down the engine and safely returned the aircraft to the ground, but experts noted the danger of uncontained failures when fragments are capable of damaging vital systems. In another case, during landing in difficult weather conditions, the landing gear collapsed. A combination of a manufacturing micro-defect and a faulty sensor created a situation in which several independent weak points coincided, forming the classic Swiss cheese model. In 1989, a wide-body aircraft lost all hydraulics after an engine disc disintegrated, and the crew, together with an instructor who happened to be on board, controlled the aircraft using only engine thrust, an almost impossible technique that allowed them to adjust direction and descent. They were unable to complete a normal landing, but they managed to guide the aircraft in a way that saved most of the people on board. In 1985, another airliner became the victim of an incorrect repair to the tail section after a long-past incident. Metal fatigue led to the failure of the pressure bulkhead, the separation of the tail, and the complete loss of control. The crew fought for more than half an hour before the aircraft crashed in mountainous terrain. Only a few survived. Even earlier, in the 1950s, the first jet passenger aircraft broke apart in mid-air because of fatigue cracks that formed at the corners of square windows. Only large-scale cyclic pressurization tests made it possible to identify the role of stress concentrators, after which the windows became oval, a solution that seems obvious today but was paid for with human lives. All these cases share one thing. Technology does not forgive small details. Metal ages, bolts may be fractions of a millimeter thinner, a crack may grow unnoticed for years, and a single miscalculation or moment of haste can trigger a chain of events leading to tragedy. Progress is real. Aviation remains the safest form of transport, but its safety is built on recognizing its own vulnerability and on the constant effort to find hidden defects before they reveal themselves in the sky. Friends, share in the comments. What do you think about this story? If you found the video interesting, support us with a like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.